edified according to your word as we allow ourselves to absorb in the lessons that we are prepared here today to learn. And we just thank you. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
So the last time we were together, we left off on 2 Kings chapter 8. 16 through 24 would be our next readings, and it's where Jeroboam reigns over Judah. Is there anyone who would like to read?
16.
16 through 24.
I'm coming from the Good News.
All right.
In the 5th year of the reign of Jeroboam, son of Ahab, as king of Israel, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, became king of Judah at the age of 32, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 8 years. His wife was Ahab's daughter, and like the family of Ahab, he followed the evil ways of the kings of Israel. He sinned against the Lord, but the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah because he had promised his servant David that his descendants would always continue to rule. During Jehoram's reign, Edom revolted against Judah and became an independent kingdom. So Jehoram set out with all his chariots to Zair, where the Edomites' army surrounded them. During the night, he and his chariot commanders managed to break out and escape, and his soldiers scattered to their homes. Edom has been independent of Judah ever since. During this same period, the city of Labnah also revolted. Everything else that Jehoram did is recorded in the history of the kings of Judah. Jehoram died and was buried in the royal tombs in David's city, and his son Ahazah succeeded him as king.
Anybody have any thoughts on that portion of scripture?
Well, I thought it was interesting that he married into
His
Ahab.
own family.
Yeah. There was a lot of that.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. But as we go on to read the word further, we see how this wickedness just was consistent. It's like it was not a break from it because these kings were marrying into the same wickedness, and it just kept going on. So eventually God needed there to be a break in the wickedness that was going on in the land. So as we get further, it kind of shows how that came about.
Yeah, the marriage was supposed to be, it was supposed to strengthen the North and the South.
Yeah.
But because of the wickedness and all the things that they did, that's what caused the upright of the other tribes to revolt against them. But that's what he did is all the wickedness he followed, instead of following God, he followed the ways of his father and of Jezebel.
All right, so now we can read. Someone wants to read 25 through 28. Azariah reigns over Judah.
Then his son Azariah became the new king during the 12th year of the reign of King Joram of Israel, the son of Ahab. Ahazah was 22 years old when he began to reign, but he reigned only 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother was Athaliah, the granddaughter of King Omri of Israel. He was an evil king, just as all of King Ahab's descendants were, for he was related to Ahab by marriage. He joined King Joram of Israel, son of Ahab, in the war against Hazael, the king of Syria, at Ramoth Gilead. King Joram was wounded in battle, so he went to Jezreel to rest and recover from his wounds. While he was there, King Uzziah of Judah, son of Jehoram, came to visit. Keep going.
What?
We at 9 now.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Meanwhile,
My mind getting a little bit.
okay. Meanwhile,
No, we can stop
Okay,
right there. I'm
okay.
sorry. So anybody had any thoughts on the ending of chapter 8, 25 through 28?
And we talked about Hazael becoming king last week, and Elisha prophesied to him that he would become king, and he murdered his master. And what happens is, here it is, we see that Israel and Judah have come together to war against Hazael.
When I was reading it, I really was like, Lord, what is it? Because it's a lot about the different reigns and the different people. And when I did, because I had to really do some research, because I was wondering, what is it that I was to get out of this? But it mainly kind of points out how these people were interrelated. Like Ahab was the son-in-law of these different houses, and how the grandmother was involved, and one was the grandson, and he married the uncle's daughter and all these things. So just kind of finding out the genealogy of everybody here, and kind of how that led to the wickedness in the land and the continuous of it. What I got out of my thoughts, even when Joram went to see, when Joram the son of Ahab raised war against the King Hazael, and they wounded Joram when he was going to be healed. And when the guy who went to visit him, that was actually his uncle, because I was like, why did he get to go see him? So I did a little bit of research on who he was to him, and that was his uncle, and he just basically was going about to visit and help him to get well, because they were, waging war and just making sure that he had his strength back up, because of course there was more to come down the line. So in my thoughts, I just wrote, even in our evil, God keeps his promises. We should be aware of our example, because others may follow, because we see how this evil keeps coming from granddaughter to grandson to uncle to auntie and everybody. And it kind of struck me like as generational curses. Who wants to be a part of a wicked lineage? And then it keeps going, because we are compelled to follow the examples that we are given. If we don't know any better, we won't do any better. So I just really was looking at what is it that I could have gotten out of that, just the display of that, and how we must be willing to follow a great example, because there are other people who are actually watching us that we may not be aware of. And also, Jeroham was young, and he did not have very much experience. So Azariah was 22 years old, and they both followed that evil example that was put in front of them. So just how we should be better examples to those who are following behind us.
And what we have to do also is, they talked about how God's word is his word. He never goes back on his word. When it talks about he would not reprimand Israel, Judah, because of David. And God had made this covenant with David. And we have to understand that when God says something, he's going to do what he said he's going to do. Even when we don't do the right thing, even when we don't keep our end of the bargain, God always stands true to his word.
And what happens is, when we see things done, we do them. So if we are raised in that type of environment, because it said that Omri, I guess that's how you pronounce it, he was one of the most evil kings. He was the 6 kings of Israel. So there's not much in there. That's all that they could find that I could look up, was that. But if we live in a house and everybody is doing something evil, we think that's the norm.
Yes, yeah.
And Athaliah, she was the only female that is in the monarch. So she was a queen, and she's the only female. So that was significant, and she was so horrible. She was so determined to become queen that she killed her kids, her children, and her grandchildren.
Wow. So showing that she could be just as wicked and ruthless as anybody else.
Yes, so now we're moving into chapter 9, the anointing of Jehu. Is there anyone who would like to read? Let's see how far we can go. 1 through 13.
chapter 9. The prophet Elisha called to a member of the group of prophets. Get ready, take this jug of oil with you and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you arrive there, look for Jehu, Jehoshaphat's son, and Nimshi's grandson. Go to him, then pull away from his associates. Pull him away. Take him into a private room. Take the jug of oil and pour it on his head. Then say, this is what the Lord has said. I anoint you king of Israel. Then open the door and run out of there without stopping. So the young prophet went to Ramoth Gilead. He came in, and the military commanders were sitting right there. He said, Commander, I have a word for you. For which one of us? Jehu asked. The young prophet said, for you, Commander. So Jehu got up and went inside. The prophet then poured oil on his head and said to him, this is what the Lord, Israel's God, says. I anoint you king over the Lord's people, over Israel. You will strike down your master Ahab's family. In this way, I will take revenge for the violence done by Jezebel to my servants, the prophets, and to all of the Lord's servants. Ahab's whole family will die. I will eliminate from Ahab everyone who urinates on a wall, whether slave or free, in Israel. I will make Ahab's dynasty like the dynasty of Jeroboam, Nabat's son, and like the dynasty of Baasha, Ahijah's son. Is that, did you say till 9 or 13? Okay. And as for Jezebel, the dogs will devour her in the area of Jezreel. No one will bury her. Then the young prophet opened the door and ran. Jehu went out to his master's officers. They said to him, is everything okay? Why did this fanatic come to you? Jehu said to them, you know the man and the nonsense he talks. That's a lie, they said. Come on, tell us. Jehu replied, this is what he said to me. This is what the Lord says. I anoint you king of Israel. Then each man quickly took his cloak and put it beneath Jehu on the paved steps. They blew a trumpet and said, Jehu has become king.
Amen.
Well, can't get no petitions. Right. Nobody had to vote.
Nobody had to vote.
That was the first thing that kind of jumped at me, that he was anointed and not yet appointed to be king, and how they immediately acknowledged that.
They were behind
You
him.
know, just think of, well, they go into a little bit later, but just think if that word got out, that he was anointed to be the king, and there actually was a king still sitting on the throne. You know, how that would have went over with the king, and, you know, they're immediately giving him that honor that they would of the king. And as I read in this part, it does go over a lot of the different, it goes over the prophecy over the long line of wickedness that had been going on in the kingdom, and how Jehu basically was going to be an instrument to carry out God's justice. You know, as we get further in it, it goes to tell more. But when I read the Old Testament, it's kind of like trying to grab that story. What that story is, because a lot of it is the prophecy, and then we have to go forward to see how it is going to be fulfilled. So we're at a part where prophecy is being spoken, and then we will go into further how that will go about. It's about to happen now. They're telling us it's about to go down. This is about to happen.
But this prophecy of Jehu being anointed, this is the second time that he's been anointed, because Elijah anointed him just before he anointed Elisha. And this went on back, I think, in 1 King, around in the 19th chapter somewhere. So he's anointed for the second time. And what happens is that so he might have even had some, you know, he might have was just sitting and wondering, because Elijah, the great man of God, anointed him early on, even before he anointed Jehu, before he anointed Elijah, before he took Elijah's hand off the plow. And what I got early on in the lesson is that, you know, what happens is, see, that another thing is that when the young man who was sent to anoint him, he went to saying some things and giving some instructions that we did not read. Mm-hmm. You know, he gave now either those instructions we didn't read about him.
He expounded on
all the things that he expounded on about Ahab's family. That wasn't covered. Either that God gave him that directly, or either. Well, I just was, the only thing that I could think is that God gave it to him directly, because we didn't read that Elijah gave it to him.
Right. Another thing, I kind of was looking at, they called him a madman. You know, what was it back in those days? Those who spoke the word of the Lord, were they considered crazy or mad? And also, why?
Those that prophesied because they were speaking something that was not. I mean, the conditions weren't. You know.
Right.
What do you mean? You know.
You know, just like today, they think that some of us are
holy rollers.
Man. You know, that the way we praise God and. You know what? Sometimes when we do the right thing, we are considered crazy, because you know what? When we do the right thing, the world said, no, I would have did it the other way. Just like say, I pick up your wallet and say, hey, you lost your wallet. Somebody else would consider it a blessing. Say he lost his wallet, he got $1,000, that's mine. They would think that I'm crazy for returning it. So that's what happens all the time amongst people of the faith.
Yeah, but right at the end of the text, they believed it.
And I think he received it
right
away. You know what I'm saying? I think he was like,
okay. So he received it, and they acted upon it.
You know, so it was him walking into his anointing.
And you know what happens is, he didn't just walk into it. He explained it to his men, and when he explained it to them, and they put down the rope, that was a show of loyalty. And that's the same thing when we come under a man or a woman of God, you know what? And we know what they are about. We are supposed to show loyalty to that individual.
Yeah.
Didn't Jehu deny it? Because they called him and said, liar, come on, tell us, for real, who was that guy?
He didn't want to
No,
tell
he
them.
was
He didn't want to tell them.
He didn't want to tell
so
them.
they wouldn't be able to get ahead of him.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
okay, all right.
Yeah, because he said they were asking, you know the story how they babbled. So he was identifying him as a prophet, and they knew he was lying. So
Yeah.
I guess God was just all involved.
Right.
And the other two men that had been anointed by prophets to be kings, they didn't take the throne immediately.
Yeah.
The first was Saul, and the second was David. And neither one of those men ever took the throne immediately soon as they were anointed.
When somebody prophesies over you and tells you something that the Lord spoke, it doesn't necessarily happen right then and there.
Right.
But it's in your, exactly. You don't, I know I did. You gonna be a preacher? No.
But it seems to me that when he received this prophecy, that it obviously had a major impact on him, because his body language communicated to his men that he had received something significant.
But that's the second time, though. The first time that he received it, I don't know exactly how long it was between the time Elijah was told to anoint him and then this time that he was anointed. There was some time between that. Elijah had been dead.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that sometimes when somebody prophesies over you, it does not happen right away.
Yeah.
He might have been real young and might have thought, okay, here's another nut saying something, and I don't want to hear that. But sure, by the second time, he was much more mature. But like somebody said, he still didn't say it right away.
Right.
But his
Because-
body language did.
Well, they knew.
They knew.
They knew, you know, that it was something more than what he was telling them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So moving forward, and I'll break it down like in bite-sized pieces, because this text was just like I really had to do a lot of like back and forth research just to kind of get what they were saying, because there's a lot of prophecy in here, prophecy being fulfilled, you know, the stories going back, and then how God used Jehu as an instrument of punishment. You know, it's just how we can look at the things that were going on. There were a lot of people that were killed, and just how this brought about the justice of God. And I really wanted to understand that. So we're going to read 14 through 16, and just when we get out that chunk, and then we'll move slow, because some of it tells a story, and then some of it goes into more pertinent points that we can discuss on. Anyone who would like to read 14 through 16?
Thus Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Joram with all Israel had been on guard at Ramoth Gilead against King Hazael of Aram. But King Joram had returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds that the Arameans had inflicted on him, when he fought against King Hazael of Aram. So Jehu said, if this is your wish, then let no one slip out of the city to go and tell the news in Jezreel. Then Jehu mounted his chariot and went to Jezreel, where Joram was lying ill. King Ahaziah of Judah had come down to visit Joram.
All right.
Plot thickens.
See, that's why he didn't want them to go tell, because he didn't want them to prepare
For-
themselves
Right.
for
For
the
him.
right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, because you got to think a king, this king is already on the throne, and this is an anointed king. So, you know, the battle has to begin, because there's the contending there. You know, there's a point that one would want to prove that they're going about their kingdom back in these days. So it just wasn't like handing you a crown type
Yeah.
situation. That person had to go on to the throne of king, you know, with power, you know, exerting his power.
And then you done killed our king, we got to do something.
Right.
You know?
All right. So moving forward, anybody else have any thoughts on that portion of the text? All right, I will read 17 through 20. In Jezreel, the sentinel standing on the tower spied the company of Jehu arriving and said, I see a company. Joram said, take a horseman and send him to meet them, and let them say, is it peace? So the horseman went to meet him. He said, thus says the king, is it peace? Jehu responded, what have you to do with peace? Fall in behind me. The sentinel reported, saying, the messenger reached them, but he is not coming back. Then he sent out a second horseman, who came to them and said, thus says the king, is it peace? Jehu answered, what have you to do with peace? Fall in behind me. Again, the sentinel reported, he reached them, but he is not coming back. It looks like the driving of Jehu, son of Nimshi, for he drives like a maniac. I thought that was interesting, because I had to read it a couple of times. What kept kind of catching my attention is that they kept falling back, and I didn't get it at first. But then I thought about all the wickedness that had been going on. You're thinking about you're a people, and there's all this wicked stuff going around you, and all of a sudden, here comes someone. The word hadn't yet been sent out, but he told them, fall behind me, and they immediately. So these people had to be tired of what was going on, and they just wanted to change. So they you know, these are messengers.
Yeah, what happened is Jehu had become serious, and now he's fighting for the throne that he'll be sitting on.
All right.
And what happened is these messengers, he gives them an opportunity to die or be with me.
Okay.
Which one you want to do?
Right. Yes. also, it's something how they made note of how he was driving. Because I was thinking, like, if he's coming there and they're sending these messengers, he had to be of serious mind. Like, he drove like it was business.
And you know what? And the one king was already hurt, was injured, and the other one, he was like saying, the other one was saying, well, I really don't want to fight with this dude, so let me see. That's why he say, oh, go out there and see what he about. And so that's how they knew how serious he was, cause none of his messengers never
Coming
returned.
back.
Yeah.
And the guy with the binoculars was looking at him. He was out there. He didn't come back. Binoculars.
Know what he say? What was that? He said something else. He said it another way. It's funny.
He said the messenger reached them, but he is not coming back.
Right.
He ain't coming back, y'all. Anybody else have any thoughts on that portion of the text?
He's truly powerful in that they would ask him about peace. Did you come in peace? And what do you have to do with peace? Just giving that in me.
Right.
That,
Yeah, that was really deep.
I have an analogy for you. Somebody got subpoenaed to testify, and he goes to the hearing, and the observer says, he's testifying.
Right now.
Seems like some things just don't change.
sure, no.
Don't change.
All right, let's finish this portion of the text out by someone reading 21 through 26.
Get my chariot ready, King Joram ordered. It was done, and he and King Ahaziah rode out, each in his own chariot to meet Jehu. They met him at the field which had belonged to Naboth. Are you coming in peace? Jehoram asked him. How can there be peace? Jehu answered. When we still have all the witchcraft and idolatry that your mother Jezebel started. It's treason, Ahaziah, Joram cried out as he turned his chariot around and fled. Jehu drew his bow and with all his strength shot an arrow that struck Joram in the back and pierced his heart. Joram fell dead in his chariot, and Jehu said to his aide, Bidkar, get his body and throw it in the field that belonged to Naboth. Remember that when you and I were riding together behind King Jehoram's father, Ahab, the Lord spoke these words against Ahab. I saw the murder of Naboth and his sons yesterday, and I promised that I will punish you here in this same field. So take his body, Jehoram ordered his aide, and throw it in the field that belonged to Naboth, so as to fulfill the Lord's promise. That's promise.
Yes, so this is where those prophecies are starting to unfold. Yes. Anyone have any thoughts?
You know what? You're right. That's when you see the prophecies that when Jezebel took Naboth's land, the vineyard that belonged to him, and the prophecies that he would die, he would be buried there. That was one of the prophecies that took place, and I was listening to how he would not allow peace, and it talks about he was not only meant to be king, he was a great warrior. He was a captain. He was used to being out front.
Jehu. Yeah, I did some reading up on Jehu, just of who he was, because basically this is someone who was carrying out God's justice. And we think about when God appoints us or anoints us to do something, even in our family, you know, how we go about doing that and how God calls his way. But his family, what I found out about him, his family ruled the northern kingdom longer than any other family that ruled the northern kingdom. And he was claiming his throne by killing Ahab's family, which was God's judgment. God needed that to happen because Ahab's family just wreaked all this wickedness in the land. You know, he needed that to stop to the point he needed this family destroyed. You know, and also just looking a little bit at Ahab, because you know you think God want to wipe out this whole family, but he brought that worship of Baal over the nation. Also, he did more to provoke God than any other king. So something needed to happen, because just in further just reading out of other people's notes, the land was doing kind of good. You know, they weren't suffering, they weren't in any famine, and people could have mistaken that as it being good. You know, so I can see, you know, people, when it's good, I'm gonna do what it takes to be good, but at the same time,
Well.
they were wrong against God. You know, as a king, the land did good. They were flourishing a little bit, and that just so happened to be enough for them. You know,
What stays the same? What did they do? What changed?
Every
Look,
time
it
I-
couldn't keep coming back
oh,
around.
God.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
time I look around, somebody talking about the economy is
Yeah.
good.
right?
No, we don't trust him. We don't think he's honest, but the
But
economy is good.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Ooh.
it's
Look
written
at
in
it
the word.
now.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing.
Yeah, some people, same thing.
The more
People
things change, the
mistake
more they
that
stay the same.
for good,
That's
and
what
it just wasn't. So they fell in behind that, and God needed that to stop. You know, just because it just needed to stop, and that influence was spreading as it is today. So we just, you know, just understanding God's way, and then how He illuminates in that to His word to us. You know, because it's like, God, you wanted to use Him to wipe out this whole family, but it needed to be done. Absolutely.
And in the beginning, wasn't it Ahab when God gave him a second chance? He told him to go and kill everybody, and he didn't do it.
Right.
He didn't do it. He let them live. That's not what I told you to do.
Right.
He was being hard-headed. So now,
Jehu's
Jehu,
telling
go in there
yeah,
and
kill
clean
all.
it out.
Yes.
But then he
Every
repented,
male.
though. That's why God let that slide, cause when he didn't kill, he repented on that one.
You just let it. See, I'm gonna get what I said to be done. It's
But
just
you
not
still
right now.
gotta do what God says,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't want to because it's hard. He ain't gonna give you nothing easy to do that. You know, every once in a while,
Right.
he gives you
He wanna
something
make
easy. But
peace.
most times, it is not easy to do. God wants you to change something around. It's not going to be an easy task. Because people are going to be resistant. Folks are going to start hating on you because you're trying to do the right thing. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. And so a lot of times we'll say, you know what, I can't do this. I've done enough. You know, it's been a little change here. You know, I'm going to let it go. But God's will has to be done. And if you don't do it, somebody will do it.
And so right here, and I like to look it up, it says, what peace can there be so long as the many whoredoms and sorceries of your mother Jezebel continue? He said, it can't be. As long as that woman is still alive, you'll never have peace. She's got to go. And everybody that belongs to her has to go. Clean it out. That's harsh, but he did it. All right.
We can't compromise. We have to do what we say do. We have to follow this word. You know, you might want to say, oh, this not going to be that serious. We can't compromise. The word is the word. Even if people say, well, Nita, she don't have no nerves. She just followed the word to the T. What's up with that?
That's Old Testament beliefs. You know, that's another thing, especially with young people. The Old Testament is like kind of out of date to today's culture, because the rules are the rules. We tend to not want to look at the rules because they're so hard. And we're contend against so much stuff nowadays that it's easier to ignore or not acknowledge what we call our grandmother's church. The church is still the same. It's all about us. We can become contemporary in the church, but it's not to change. You know, we're not. You know, songs are becoming different. The culture is becoming different as it's growing in the church, but it's not about changing the church or eradicating the Old Testament part of the church. It still exists. So these rules are still here.
It's the basis for the new.
Yeah.
The Old Testament is the basis for the New Testament.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. I
Have you
agree.
heard people say, I'm a New Testament
Christian.
Christian?
Absolutely, I have. Never understood it. Like, what is that?
What did that mean?
I guess that Jesus Christ saved me, and I'm just saved by the blood of the Lamb and the word of my testimony, and
So they don't believe in Trinity.
Right.
You know,
there's
that
no
before Jesus
condemnation.
there was God.
Yeah, God forgive me for everybody.
Okay.
I'm just forgiven.
I'm on grace.
Yeah, I'm just
skating
good.
on grace.
Yeah, I'm good
You
all
know.
the time because Jesus died. But there's consequences to his death.
That's it.
Yes,
That's right.
absolutely.
Those-
So we have to
The
take it.
rules are still there.
So Uzziah of Judah killed, 27 through 29.
But when Uzziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled by the way of the garden house, and Jehu followed after him, and said, Smite him also in the chariot. And they did so at the going up to Gur, which is by Ibleam, and he fled to Megiddo, and died there. And his servant carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem, and buried him in his sepulchre with his fathers in the city of David. And in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, began Ahaziah to reign over Judah. Is that where you want to stop?
Yes. So the one thing that kind of, I was sitting with this and it just kind of like, Lord, when we read these about these wars and these fights and how these people, it's gruesome. It wasn't no easy death. Most definitely. But as God was sitting with me with this, it's like their violent deaths definitely can be viewed as a punishment for leading Israel astray. Anyone who has died in this period of time and God used his judgment against them, they're needed to, because we're talking about different times. So we're not talking about this time. So I had to remove myself from the time, because this is time when they used to hang people, cut your fingers off, and stole and things like that. So it was going to be a vicious death. If you disobeyed God, everybody knew that. Now everybody did not suffer the consequences, but those who did at the time, they had to, everybody knew when they died that they led Israel astray. So their violent death was viewed that way. Like they disobeyed God, so God put down his punishment on them, and that was the ruling that God gave them.
But the murder of this king, what is his name? Ahaziah. You know what? His killing him was not in the instructions, but you know what? He was a distant relative of Ben Hadad. Yeah, he was a distant relative in the family. So what happened is Jehu, he is showing his zeal. He said, I gotta do it. He was with him. He in on it. Gonna clean the whole slate.
Yeah.
Because it shows here how he becomes king of Israel by the anointing of God, and all the rest of these kings became king because they was in line by the family.
So can I just throw out a question there? So you mentioned all the violence that went on in the Old Testament times. How do we justify that? Because some people run away from the Old Testament because of that very thing. It was so gruesome. It was so this and so that. So they don't want to identify with that as if those same kinds of things are not happening. But there are other? So I guess I'm not really asking a question. I'm talking about how we help people to understand how we still die violently, but we die in other ways. Our negligence, our disregard for God causes us to sometimes be dead inside. I know I've had periods of time where I just felt dead inside. There was nothing happening in my life. And so that somebody could have just smite me. You might as well have, because there was nothing prospering, nothing growing in my life, nothing happening, productive. And so that's another way to think about it. So we can't forget all of this, you know, because that's the way they did it then. But our disregard for God and just serving lip service. You know, people are always talking about God, but don't know nothing about God. You know, I'm sorry. Yeah, I talked about God, but until I got in church and started learning about God, Bible study, Sunday school, Sunday worship, being with the saints, there's a difference. And these people that think that they can get what they need at home and on TV are sadly mistaken.
There's a
It's
spirit
not the
that's
same.
in them.
Well, you know what I want to say
It is.
something. You know what? Jehu, he justified what he did because he was carrying out God's word. And that's how he was able to justify the killing that he did. He said, I'm doing all this in the name of the Lord. And then see, just like you will see as in the next chapter, that it's almost as if Jehu is what you call a reform movement. So some things have got to change. And they're not going to change if all these people are still around.
Or if they're still doing what they're doing. So
Right.
we can kill people another way now.
Right.
You know, we can squash that spirit that they bring around that is causing confusion, or remove them from positions, or block them from even being a part of something if that's, you know, if that's possible. But there's a way to do that same kind of thing without it being violent, I guess is what we need to be able to articulate to people when they talk against the Old Testament.
So in the Old Testament, it was more physical and literal, and now it's more spiritual and literal. Still.
Because that was the way God's relationship with man and woman was through fear. The fear,
Yeah.
not respect.
Right.
You know, I am God. You do what I say do. But after a time, God realized that was not working. It was not working. They'll be okay for a minute. You know, it's like the kids you whoop all the time. As long as you beating them, they good.
Yeah.
As soon as you stop beating them, they doing the same old thing, you know. So God said, this is not working. So I've got to do something different. Even God said, man, I need them to love me, not be fearful and only do the right thing when they think I'm not looking.
So he sent his son, who left the Holy Spirit.
And we got to think that the Bible is our instruction manual in a way. And these stories, like I say, God want to illuminate it to us. Like He loves us. We know that. Then we have Jesus Christ, who we know loves us in our most dirtiest way and accepts us. And in this way, God shows us the seriousness of who He is. You know, like I will use my people to kill all your people, you know, if you don't listen to what I do or say. So I think He gave us a gentle way of seeing it, because as the pastor said, we have so much violence. You know, it's like we're being told this story of this land, but we think of what goes on all over the world. You know, and it's just like right here in this text to help us to understand why we have to be so careful in listening to God as He leads us in what to do. Because it gets interesting when we do get off in chapter 10. It's like I'm trying to slow it down because chapter 10 was so very interesting to me, because it points a little bit more out to what Jehu's behavior was, and how it also illuminated to me how we have to be so careful in following the leading of God that we don't allow ourselves to kind of start taking control in what's going on. So I think He shows us the violence because it was violent. If you didn't do what God says He say, and you led His people astray, He was serious about His people. You know, so He got people to be about His business, and those people who were about His business had to do some real stuff, and that meant it might be strike down a whole family. But just think of all the people who witnessed that, how they changed in Israel, how the land changed. You know, God needed to wipe it out. You know, it's like today we kind of need to wipe out. You know, but God won't do that, because we have Jesus who loves us and who forgives us and allow us to start ourselves again over and over and over. Every morning we get a new grace. So we just rejoice in how much God loves us, that we don't live in these Old Testament times.
Yes, Because, you know, even in the Old Testament, and we weren't introduced to Jesus as grace, but God was extending grace because Israel sinned over and
Over
over
time.
and over again. So God did exercise grace even before we knew Jesus. So-
Right, yes.
So
Yes, ma'am.
Jesus was there with us. So
Absolutely.
there you go.
Yes,
And,
ma'am.
and even in Ahab,
Mhm.
God had given them more than one opportunity to
Exactly.
repent and turn around. And yet he would find himself right
Yeah,
back
Jezebel, as
letting
we would say.
Jezebel control, his kingdom.
Mhm. She
Alright.
already said, do I have to do everything for you?
Mhm.
And I like how you were bringing out the fact that, God at this point in the Old Testament, how he was, destroying stuff. And even, if you look at when Jesus was on, when they were, I forget the scene, but when he was talking about, if I wanted to, I could call 10,000 legions of angels.
Mhm.
So he hadn't lost, the
He knew what he could do.
he knew what he could do, but it was for a reason that he was allowing, man to, handle him in that situation.
That's where we teach grace.
All right, here we go with Miss
Miss
Jezebel.
Jezebel.
Violent death.
Finally.
Yes. So who wants to read this portion?
When Jezebel heard that Jehu had come to Jezreel, she painted her eyelids and fixed her hair and sat at a window. When Jehu entered the gate of the palace, she shouted at him, "How are you today, you murderer, you son of Zimri, who murdered his master?" He looked up and saw her at the window and shouted, "Who is on my side?" And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked out at him. "Throw her down," he yelled. So they threw her out the window, and her blood spattered against the wall on the horses, and she was trampled by the horses' hooves. Then Jehu went into the palace for lunch. Afterwards, he said, "Someone go and bury this cursed woman, for she is the daughter of a king." But when they went out to bury her, they found only her skull, her feet, and her hands. When they returned and told him, he remarked, "That is just what the Lord said would happen." He told Elijah the prophet that the dogs would eat her flesh and that her body would be scattered like manure upon the field, so that no one could tell whose it was.
Now Jezebel, she went and got her nails done, hair, makeup done.
What do we think about that? Because it says when he came, she heard of it. So she knew he was coming.
Right.
And she went out and painted her nails and got her hair done, and she was looking out the window, so she was there. What do we think her position was? Was it the position of a queen, someone ready to die, or
I think she thought that she could sway him.
Sway him.
Oh,
No,
Yeah.
well, you know what? She was the queen, and she prepared to die when she called him Zimri, the murder of your master. She was comparing Zimri was the servant of Bathsheba who killed her. And what she was doing is, in the other translations, all she was doing is like, "What are you doing? Hey, you murderer." She was calling him out of his name because she had heard everything that he did, and she was like expecting him. And when he asked the eunuchs, he said, "Hey, which one of y'all is with me? Y'all with? We all with you."
Right.
And they threw over the thing. So what happened is, everybody is hearing the word of mouth at that time was greater than you all smartphones. They knew he was coming. And the word had gone. So that boy Jehu was doing his thing. You know what? And when he asked them, it says right here, he asked them, say, "Hey, which one of y'all up there is with me?" And they say, "We all with you." They threw her out the
We've
window.
probably been waiting on an opportunity.
I
Yeah.
think she was
Yeah.
surprised. I don't think she knew she was.
And
I don't think she did either.
I think she did.
She may have, but she
think so,
still
because
was.
She
She was
knew.
gonna go out
She
like
knew.
Jezebel, though.
She
Yeah,
knew, like
yeah,
Greg
she's
said,
gonna go out like
the word had
Jezebel.
already gone forth that Jehu was on his way. He would, and what he had already done, and she knew it was against her bloodline. And she went to get her nails and stuff done and pretty herself up to prepare to die. That's what she
I
do.
don't know.
I
I think
honestly
she
believe
knew.
that.
I think she knew who he was, but I still think
Think
she
she
was
thought-
putting
she
on
thought
her
she could-
her
she was
cunning
right.
cousin.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they had been doing
yeah.
everything she wanted them to do before.
Right.
You know, so why would I prepare this out for him, please?
Jeez.
Come on now.
This little thing.
Well, this is what okay, so that could
Go
be.
ahead.
It said, what I have here is that doubtless Jezebel's adornment
Mhm.
was intended to create a queenly appearance in the face of impending death and serve as a royal burial preparation.
Oh, okay.
She did,
Okay.
so
She
if
knew
you-
it was coming.
If you in power, you supposed to be looking like that to the end. You know, anybody who's been voted out of an office or been the security's coming to get you to remove you from your CEO position. You looking good when you walk out. Your head is up. You don't want to look like you scared or you know you embarrassed. Yeah.
It seems to me that Jezebel was doing what Jezebel always did. You know, the tactics she was using, displaying here, were the exact same tactics she displayed with Ahab. So it just seems to me that she was just trying. She was going to persuade, thinking she would persuade the new guy, just like she persuaded the old guy.
That's right.
You know.
And that's
you
our
know what
commentary.
happened is, the trampling, her being trampled is what you call a undignified death. It's like the most, like, you know, you want to die with dignity and respect, but
Yeah.
when you are trampled like that, that is what's like, during that time was what's known as a disgraceful death.
Yeah, because she was a queen, she was of royalty. Just think she wanted to be buried in the royal tomb. You know, we could think if she did think she was dying, you know, I'm gonna look good when they embalm me or whatever they did back in those days. But as I read through this, at first I was like, why did she call him that? Zamari? You know, I didn't catch it at first because I was reading, but then I'm like, I had to slow down a little bit because I knew who she was talking to, but as he referred, he was an army commander that killed Elisha, and he declared himself king. You know, basically somebody killed his master, declared himself king, but he only reigned for 7 days, so he was not in that kingdom ship very long. So I feel like she used it as an insult, and also to accuse him, you know, just to, you know, just insult him at that time. Because if he was gonna take her out, you gonna take me out, and I'm gonna insult you in these other words. You're gonna remember that last came out of my mouth. You know, just kind of just do him wrong. And also when I read about the eunuchs, they must have been done with all that evil around them. You know, because you gotta think they were up there with her, and they literally tossed her out the window. You know what she was thinking going down. You know, these are people that's been helping her. You know what I'm saying? They're right there with her, and they just flung her out
They
the
probably did
window.
her nails too.
Yeah, absolutely.
They
Yeah.
already ran because they're eunuchs.
Yeah.
Somebody ordered that, didn't they?
They're right.
And they knew Jehu was coming to take care of business.
Right.
Right.
And they was like, cause when he asked who with me,
They
They were
jumped
like,
on it.
She
you're
was
not
already
killing
out
me,
the
you
window.
want her, and we're giving her to you.
Toss over.
Yes.
And not only, like Greg said, she got trampled, but the dogs ate
Yeah.
her flesh. The only thing was left was her skull, her feet, and her hands.
Yes, and I've read the reason why they didn't eat her hands and feet is because those are the bitter parts of the body. So they weren't good to eat anyway. That's why they left them, you know, because, you know,
Okay.
yeah. So those are considered bitter. And just how,
People like
The
pig.
dogs did it.
right, they didn't want her hands or her feet. You gotta think of all the
Pickle pig
things
feet,
she
you didn't know?
she put her, all the things she put her hands to, or all the places her feet walked, you know,
Yeah,
just
that's right.
that
didn't have no heels.
they didn't even want that. And Jehu had no remorse in killing her. Basically, after he killed her, he went, ate and drank, and then he called for her to be buried. You know, you gotta think he had conscience in
That's
it.
good. That's
Yeah,
good.
he
He
had
don't
conscience
go in and
about
have
it.
lunch.
Yeah.
Well, he followed royalty order because he said she is the daughter of a king.
Right.
So we
Right.
got to give her a proper burial. But when they came back to him, there ain't nothing left to bury.
Right.
They
God
even
had
thought
already
about
told
that
us.
part.
Right. And as we think about those who cannot be buried, just how her soul will never be at rest, you know, just in theory. Like, she didn't, just to think she was a queen in her family lineage and how she was not laid with all of them, how she was literally eaten by dogs, and just how, I guess I wrote in my binder, those who do not obey God will be punished.
Okay.
You know, everybody who knew Jezebel got word about how she died, and they knew about how she lived, and basically there was no more left of her, you know, nothing. Her hands and her feet, you know, and as I've read somewhere, the dogs didn't even want to eat that part. That wasn't
And
a good
that was
part to eat.
prophecy fulfilled.
Yeah, right? Right? Yes, ma'am. Yep. So anybody else got some thoughts? As we stop here, we'll be moving into chapter 10. I think, you know, we can pick up off that one next week because, like I said, it gets into the guts of who Jehu was and how he went about fulfilling the things that God wanted him to do. You know, like I said, it just spoke so much about how we need to be for God all the way. You know, sometimes we can put a little bit of ourselves in that. You know, it's kind of like making a lasagna before we bring it to the church. We cut that one good middle piece out for ourselves.
That's the way you do it.
You know, we can't do that. That's the best piece. So, all right. So
I thought it was just amazing that it took that long to kill Jezebel, because she wreaked havoc in Israel. She wreaked havoc, and she deserved to die the way she did because of the things that she did and the people that she killed, and you know, she got what she had coming.
Well, isn't it almost like, and when you said that, I thought about God putting Israel in exile. He said, I'm going to make you suffer for the things that you worship. You know, it's not going to be a quickie. You know, I forgive you, and then you keep going back and forth. I'm going to let you stir in there for a while. So Jezebel was around for a while. and that's what I'm scared about being 45, because maybe he's going to punish us for another 40 years. But
we have other evil situations that have been around for a long time, or people, and you wonder, I don't care, maybe it's 4 days or 4 years.
Or 400.
Or 400.
400. And you wonder, my God, when is this going to end? You know, so.
But look at the people in Cambodia and in places like that live in things that's made out of tin cans and different things, and we walk around here and, you know, we live in large, actually. And so, God knows the minute, the hour, the second when these things are going to come to pass. And he gives us chance after chance after chance to get this thing right. So if you ain't getting it right, you need to be thrown out the window. You need to have your hands hanging somewhere. You know what I'm saying?
And then as Christians, as men and women of God, when we are speculating on the wrong things, because just like God told Elijah, he say, look, you complaining. I got 7,000 people that have never bowed down to Baal. And that's what we have to do. We can't be concerned with what's going on around us. We have to continue just to be faithful to him. And then if we do that, the ones the Bible says that he never leave or forsake you. And it talks about the ones that never beg for bread. Those are the ones who are faithful to God. And he takes care of them.
And look at the purging this thing is going on in our country. The purging of the other folks that's been in there for years and years and years and allow the things to go on. So we gotta look at the good part and the bad part.
And it has been going on a long time.
Yes.
And stuff is being exposed. Now, we always suspected certain things, but the stuff that's coming out, it's just been unbelievable.
and they're still saying
And,
but you don't see that.
but it doesn't matter, because
Exactly.
now we have eyes to see,
Yeah.
and you can't go back once you've seen it.
Right.
You know, we've been blind for a minute.
all right. Well, what a wonderful conversation we
Amen.
had tonight.
You want to finish next week?
Oh, we'll let somebody else do it. Yeah, 'cause I'm definitely right off at the good part. Yeah. So, yes. Well.
So you want
Just-
to invite people to church?
Yes, well, we invite you guys every Sunday. Everyone is welcome to Grace Church with our
500 223rd Street.
She says that every Sunday. I did that to be a little funny, but she invites you guys every Sunday, and you're missing out. So come join us for Bible study, join us for Sunday worship and Sunday school. We'll be more than happy to have you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Amen.